Hi there, welcome to Hardware Heaven. I'm Stuart and today we're going to be taking a look at the latest PC from Chillblast. It's the Fusion Tiger Shark. Now this is an Intel Haswell PC, so the most up-to-date range of processors. It's based on an i5-4670K, and instead of running it just at the stock speed, Chillblast have taken the time to overclock it at their factory before sending it out, so we're running it over 4 GHz on the CPU out of the box. It comes with 8 gigs of memory, a GTX 660 graphics card, so a decent mid-range system that starts around £750 for the price. So we're going to have a look at some CPU benchmarks, how the motherboard performs, so things like SATA speed, PCIe speed, USB 3 speed, all that sort of thing, and also take a look at power use, gaming, all that sort of thing. So we'll also include a few videos of gaming, things like Grid 2, Metro Last Light, just let you see how these recent games run on the Tiger Shark. And let's get started. So here we have a quick look at the outside of the Fusion Tiger Shark. It uses a CM Storm Enforcer case, and that has a left side window. There is a front panel door, so we open that up to get into the optical bays, and there is a empty fan location on the top of the case. That allows you to also install radiators if you wanted to try that in the future, and the vent down the front panel, through that we can see the red LED fan that is inside the case. So this is the inside of the Tiger Shark, and of course it's a Cooler Master case as we've discussed before. What we have here down the bottom left is the power supply, and it's an NRP VC503 Sigmatech unit. That's a 500 watt model, and it's a pretty value orientated power supply, so there's no modular connectors or anything like that. It's not bronze certified or silver or gold or anything like that, just a very basic entry-level 500 watt power supply. Beside it we have a bunch of wires tied up, so that's for the front panel USB 3, power LED, things like that, so it's nice to see them all tied. And then looking at the board itself, we have an Asus Z87K. Now it looks like a black PCB, but it's actually got a brown tinge to it. There are two large 16 times slots, so they're 16 times physical, but only one of them is 16 times electrical, so this second large slot here is actually an 8 times slot when it's populated. There are gold coloured heat sinks on the power circuitry up in the left there, just move that slightly, just up in there, and then a second one here underneath the graphics card. They've also decided to use a similar colour for the SATA 3 SATA 3 data connectors. There are, interestingly enough, two further ones up here, so 4 down here, 2 up at mid-board, and that's quite an interesting, unique way to do that. Not seen that often before, usually about as far up as here at the very most, but Asus have decided to put some up mid-board, which is great, because what that means is we have the power coming out of the graphics card, that's a 6-pin connector, the USB 3 front panel wiring, the SATA wire, and the 24-pin power connector all coming out in one bunch, which are tied together. Nice, and so there's actually 3 cable ties on there, so plenty that have been used. Gainward graphics card here, it's a GTX 660 2GB. Again, similar colour scheme, so we've got black with kind of gold. That maybe is a happy coincidence that the Gainward card matches the Z87 board that's been used here, but it does look good. What we've also got is a second Sigmatech part, so this tower cooler here with aluminium fins and copper heat pipes has a 12cm fan on that side. We could, if we wanted to, mount a second fan over on the left hand side and just pull air right through out to the standard case fan that's at the back there. That's Cooler Master branded. There's no fan up the top of this case. There is space, however, to mount that and maybe a small radiator, anything like that if you wanted to get a little bit fancier in the future. Then up at the top right of the case we've got an optical drive, so for this model, Chillblast have installed a standard DVD writer, but we could ask them to install Blu-ray or anything like that if we wished. Cable tie used here as well, just keeping things all nice and tidy. In this drive bay here, we've actually got a card reader. So you open the front door of the case and you've got your card reader in there. It also has a USB port on the front, so you could charge from it and things like that. So a nice handy little device. And then just down in here is the front intake fan. It's a transparent plastic that's used there, and it's got red LEDs on it, so red light shines out the front of your case and a little bit into the main chamber, just giving that glow, because there's actually a window on the side panel of the Cooler Master case. And then the other component of note over this side is the hard drive. So this is a Toshiba 1TB model. It's actually a Hitachi drive because Toshiba bought Hitachi's hard drive business and they're just going through the rebranding process at the moment. So it's actually got a sticker on it with a Toshiba part number, but another one as well with a Hitachi part number. So very much a Hitachi drive, but just not under that brand anymore. So up underneath the cooler here we have an i5-4670K. That's a quad-core CPU. It usually runs at 3.4 GHz but can turbo up to 3.8, and Chillblast have set a BIOS profile so that we can turbo up to 4.4 out of the box, and generally the system does run at that quite often, but obviously idles down to, we've seen it as low as 1 GHz when idle. And finally we have some memory, or not actually finally, because we'll discuss something else in a second, but we've got some Corsair Value Select memory. This is 1333 MHz memory, 2 4GB Cas9 modules. So again, a pretty mainstream slash entry level part, but it's just good, a decent enough brand, so that should help keep the costs down. So two further things just to mention about the inside of the main chamber. First one is that hidden away behind the graphics card, you can't actually see it, but I can pull these out here. We have a wireless N card in there, so it's a TP-Link wireless N card. It's single band, so it's not got 5 GHz support, but it is wireless N, so that's a nice little extra for this build. And one thing that we are not particularly keen on, and it's specific to the PSU, is the colour of the power connectors. So we have white and strangely luminous green, which seems very odd. And then up at the top left of the case, where the 8-pin connector is, just at the very top in there, just disconnect it a little bit, make it easier to see. So up in there we've got a white 2 4-pin connectors that combine to an 8-pin connector. Just ruins the look of the system just that little bit. It would be better if these were black. Don't know why Sigmatech have opted for white. It just looks old, and really black connectors wouldn't have saved them or cost them very much money, and would have been matching the paint used on the power supply as well as the motherboard. So very strange decision by Sigmatech, and a little bit of an odd decision by Chillblast, because they decided to then use that power supply in this system. So that is the main components inside the Tiger Shark. So GTX 660, i5-4670K, 8 gigs of memory. There we go. So let's have a look round at the wiring at the back of the motherboard tray. Okay, so we're round at the back of the motherboard tray now. It's very easy to get into this system to change it and upgrade it. We simply take 2 screws off the back edge of the system on each side, and the side panels slide off. The left side is windowed, the right side is blank. So that's the standard way that this Cooler Master case is. And we've got some wiring running here from the bottom of the case, so this is where our USB ports are, case front panel wiring, all that sort of stuff, the power supply, and it runs up this main channel here, tied at various points, including through the case wiring holes, so there's a nice good hold on the cabling there, very little movement to it at all. The second bundle of cables here is mostly Molex, although there is a floppy connector there, reasonably well tied up. They've got extra cable ties in there holding larger bundles together, and then one to secure it on there, secured at various points all throughout the main chamber of the case, so some nice effort put in there. Also over the left hand side here you can see that Chillblast have tried to hide some of the front fan wires by putting them along with the power wires for our SATA drive. Now that's probably the one area where we would have had Chillblast change the way that they built this system. So we've got a single drive in here, a 1TB drive. That's going to be good for most people for quite a while, but the first thing that we're likely to change in the system, maybe other than the graphics card, or maybe even before the graphics card, is to put a second drive in. So it might be an SSD to give us faster boot speed, it might be a larger capacity drive just to give us that little bit of extra storage. So they slide in here quite easily, it's a tool-free install. But wiring wise, we're going to either have to cut into all these cable ties to free off and then tie up the new cables, or we're going to just have to leave them loose. Now if Chillblast had used a wiring layout where they had the extra SATA wire already pre-wired in here and we just lifted maybe one cable tie off and plugged it straight in, that would have been a nice little bonus for us. But other than thinking about future wiring, this is all pretty good, and yes, some nice cable layout by Chillblast. Here we have a very quick look at the front panel of the case. So at the top, USB 3, USB 2, two 3.5mm audio in-out ports, USB 2 and USB 3, so two of each, power button, LED running behind it that lights up red when things are on, and then there's a hard drive LED just off to the left there. Our reset switch is just in there behind the door, so covered up because everyone at one point in using a PC manages to accidentally hit the reset switch. And then we've got our DVD writer here, empty bays, and then just down the bottom, I'll just reset the camera, there we go, a card reader with the USB port that we mentioned earlier, so a nice little extra there from Chillblast. Round at the back of the system we've got pretty standard connectivity around here. Starts with keyboard and mouse ports up here, that's PS2 ports, which are just hidden by the lip of the case here. Then where you can start to see the ports, we've got HDMI, DVI and VGA, two USB 2.0 ports, two USB 3.0 ports, a second set of USB 2.0 ports, gigabit LAN, three 3.5mm audio ports. We've obviously got our antenna there for the wireless end card that's at the back, and then if I just tilt the case for you, we've got our graphics card outputs, so that's dual DVI, DisplayPort and HDMI. We've now looked at the outside and the inside of the Fusion Tiger Shark, so just a little bit of time here on the operating system. Really it's a basic build, that's all we would want from a new system, so it's running Windows 8, you can have 64-bit on there. There's very little extra software that Chillblast installs, so you get their FAQ shortcut, you also get the drivers for things like the GeForce card, all that sort of normal stuff, and we also have GeForce Experience, which is an interesting thing to see added to a base build. That GeForce Experience helps us set settings for our GTX 660 which work well with all the latest games, so it's something that novice users who might not be really into their games can use to get up and running with the system. Other than that, very basic build, lets us go off and choose the software we want to have on it rather than loads of bloat and antivirus things that we're just not interested in when we might have our own personal preference for that. So quick look at CPU-Z and GPU-Z just to round things off before we start on results. So as we've said before, it's an i5-4670K, that's a quad core CPU running at 4.4 out of the box. We have 8 gigs of dual channel DDR3 from Corsair, Cas9, and on the GTX 660 it is a 2 gig version of the card. The GPU clock's 980, but that boosts up to 1033 MHz, and we've got 1500 MHz memory. So all in all, a pretty decent mid-range spec, a good way of getting a mainstream Haswell CPU and getting a little bit of extra value from it by the looks of things. So let's see if the performance doesn't let us down. So here we have some CPU tests to start off with, but before we get into the actual figures, just a couple of things to go over. If you are a gamer and you don't really care about SATA performance or how this performs at converting music or anything like that, then you might want to skip forward to about 22 minutes into this video. There's a whole load of tests before that, and if you're just a gamer, then that's the place to start. It's around about the 3D Mark section, and then of course we go on to show video footage of how the card performs in some of the latest games. For everyone else, we have some comparison systems here which are based around an AMD FX 8350 and an i7-4770K. They turbo up to 4.2 and 3.9 GHz. So it gives a little comparison about how the overclocked Chillblast CPU does against a retail processor and where we might get that little extra value for money. The first test that we can see here is that on the Drystone test we do get a boost from the overclock, but it isn't as effective on the second part of the SiSoft Sandra test. So moving to Cinebench, we have a score of 7.42 points on the Chillblast system. That takes it faster than the FX 8350, even though that's turboing up towards 4.2 GHz. And then the i7-4770K with its 8 threads very much gets a boost in performance from those extra threads on Cinebench, and that takes it faster than the 4670K. So in real world use, what we have here is a test converting video from a high definition source down to tablet resolution, and even though the AMD FX and Intel i7 systems have a faster GPU in terms of spec helping with the GPU encoding, the higher megahertz rating of the CPU in the Chillblast system is helping it to convert this video faster, and so we complete the encoding about 8 seconds faster on the Chillblast system. Where we don't see the same sort of benefit is in music conversion, because this application that we're using here is very much multi-threaded. So we have a case where the i7 and FX CPUs with their 8 threads are allowing us to convert a track on each thread at a time, so 8 tracks always being converted. So 2 CDs are converted in 42 seconds on the Intel system, 49 seconds on the AMD FX, and because we've only 4 threads on the Chillblast, it takes 55 seconds. One of the areas where we saw that Chillblast were keeping costs down was memory. They were using 1333 MHz memory and its Corsair value memory. Not a huge issue in terms of stability or anything like that, it worked absolutely flawlessly, but there is the option, if we're buying our own components and building our own system, to use higher spec memory or upgrade to that in the future. And here's some results here that show the extra bandwidth that you can get from 1866 MHz memory on both a Z87 system and the 990 FX. So that brings us to SATA performance, and we can see that the mechanical drive used by Chillblast isn't able to compete with an SSD that we might use in a custom build system. That doesn't necessarily mean the Chillblast system is performing badly, because these are actually very good results for a mechanical drive, but we would benefit in the future from installing an SSD to maybe boot our operating system and key programs from. Moving to PCIe speed, we can see that there's some really good performance from the Chillblast system. It doesn't quite hit the heights of high-end 990 FX based system or a Z87 high-end board, but it's performing pretty well for PCIe 3.0, getting loads of performance from our PCIe based SSD and topping out at 1494 megabytes a second on reads and 1243 on writes. So that brings us to USB 3 performance, and here we can see that the Chillblast system is very competitive. It's taking on the high-end Z87 board and actually manages to exceed it just by a couple of megabytes a second, which is great to see. The 990FX board does fall considerably behind here because that older AMD board is using a less than great USB 3.0 controller, and so we can see the benefit of the newer Intel systems here. So moving on to Wi-Fi, and really we can say that it's single band, it's guaranteed for 300 Mbps and all that sort of stuff, but in the real world that means nothing to most people. So what we've got here is where our network card topped out on our home internet connection. Anyone up to about a 70 meg connection is going to be fine for downloads with this card. Above that you would want to replace it, and if we registered 10 megabytes upload, which was our home network connections limit. So decent performance from the Chillblast choice of network card. And of course, what does that mean for us? Well, it means we can stream 4K video without any issue, and looking at the CPU performance on that, we can see that the Chillblast system had no problems playing the 4K once it was provided by the Wi-Fi. 18.8% CPU use when playing back 4K video, so plenty resource free, and should mean that we can scale the system in the future absolutely fine. Power consumption next, and at idle the system used 60 watts, and that was when it was dropping down as low as 1 GHz due to power saving technology. When we fully loaded the CPU and GPU we hit 299 watts, which is pretty high but not over the top, so something we would expect from an overclocked CPU with a mid-range GPU, both running at 100% load or so. And in terms of performance, that was 74 Celsius on the CPU, 73 on the GPU, low noise levels at all time. We registered about 44 to 45 decibels from about a meter away. The idle temperatures were also very good, down in the high 20s to low 30s, so overall some decent performance from the Chillblast system, despite the fact it's fully air cooled rather than using liquid cooling. So moving to some gaming performance, or 3D performance I guess you could say for this, we've got the first test here in green is 3D Mark Firestrike. That is using the Extreme profile, and we can get 2,146 points on the Chillblast system, and that allows you to compare it to your own system and see whether you would benefit from this model. We've also run a quick test on PC Mark 8. We're using the home test, which runs things like web browsing and chatting, all that sort of stuff, document processing, to test the performance of a system, and we found that the result was 5,089 points on the default configuration. So when PC Mark 8 is out, download it, check it out, and see how your system compares. Moving on to gaming, we've got BioShock Infinite up first. We're running at 1920 by 1080 with ultra detail, and overall some very good stats from the Fusion Tiger Shark. We averaging nearly 40 frames per second, it's completely smooth at all times, and topping out at 46 frames per second with that ultra detail level. So just coming up now, we have a little video showing how the gaming was on this system. So on to Dota 2 now, and again we're at 1920 by 1080 and we've got maximum detail on in this game. In terms of how we had to tweak the game to get these frame rates, all we had to do was turn off the frame rate cap, and that took us up over the 120 frames per second that the game usually has, and really flawless performance on the Tiger Shark here. It never drops below 124 frames a second, so that is as good as you can get.
Open your veins. Blood feud. Blood gold. As you wish. For the flayed ones.
Okay, so grid 2 now, and again 1920 by 1080, and we're on the ultra profile here. And overall, again, good performance from the Fusion Tiger Shark. So we stay above 36 frames per second at all time, averaging 42, topping out at 50, and really no problems at all with smoothness. Just a good looking game, and that's quite impressive for a recent release. And here's a little look at some racing on the Fusion Tiger Shark.
The pack, step it up. Great, on to the next.
Okay, so the last test for this review is Metro Last Light. Again, maximum detail. We don't have anti-aliasing on here. We did have it on for grid 2 at 8 times and Dota 2 at maximum on in-game. But Metro doesn't quite manage that. We would be too low in performance with anti-aliasing. We do have PhysX on, so that's using the 660 to provide enhanced graphics. And overall, a good set of performance figures here. So here's some gameplay before we go to the conclusion.
In the past, trains were ordinary things, but now, this monorail seems magic, doesn't it? Our kids won't know how to operate these things, and their kids will probably think this was built by the gods.
Alright, we've reached the station. This is part of the secret Metro 2 line. We haven't explored these tunnels. Can't spare the time or manpower, so don't wander off. I'll try to put some juice on the system and get the lights on. Use your flashlights in the meantime.
Right, you ready? Let's move.
Watch yourself, the doors are closing. Good luck.
Yeah, we'll need it. Didn't you and my father take the monorail when you went out to fire the missiles at the Dark One's nest? That's a good sign, Rabbit.
Hi, so that's the Chillblast Fusion Tiger Shark. It's a PC which has pretty good build quality. The case that they've chosen to use is a good one, so we've been quite a fan of Cooler Master Storm cases for a while, and the Enforcer is one of the cases that we're quite happy to see Chillblast use. It has good potential for upgrades in the future, so if you wanted to add extra fan in the top or a liquid cooling radiator, you could do that. It's got nice LEDs at the front. Good to see a system with a door in the front just protecting your reset button, and little things like that that make all the difference to some systems. Inside the system we've got a decent level of components, so the Sigmatech cooler did a good job. We have a decent graphics card, and the Gainward GTX 660 did everything we needed off it, and the Corsair memory of course is in there. It's a good brand as well, and the Asus motherboard. For the motherboard, more than happy with that particular choice as well. It would have been good if Chillblast had gone with a board that had BIOS profiles, so that if you had to reset the BIOS for any reason, you could just go back in and load up the overclocking profile and get back there quickly, rather than maybe need to contact support just to check what settings they had and things like that. The one area where we weren't so happy with build quality was the power supply. It's not a bad power supply, but it's not a great power supply either. It's very much an entry level part of the system, and while it was okay for Chillblast to cut costs in terms of using just a mechanical drive rather than a hybrid, or using 1333 MHz memory rather than a higher spec, or going with a value memory, anything like that, all fine. But the power supply is one area we would have preferred they didn't skimp, even if it was at the expense of maybe taking out the card reader, which was a nice addition but not an essential. It would have been good to have maybe a low-end Corsair power supply or something like that, just to give that a little bit extra, even down to the fact that the Corsair power supply would have had black plugs on the 24-pin CPU connector or the 8-pin CPU connector, power connectors even, and so, you know, those little touches like the white or the randomly luminous green pins on the 24-pin just seems very bizarre, and you know, that is one area we wouldn't have liked to see Chillblast skimp quite so much on. But overall, a pretty decent build, good wiring, all tied up very nicely, especially around the back of the case. As we said, it would be good if they'd wired in a second SATA power and data cable, just so that if we did want to chuck a drive in the future, the wiring's all there, and we wouldn't need to cut all the cable ties that they've used and tied up all very nicely. It kind of defeats the purpose of tying them up if you have to then rip them out the first time you open it to upgrade. If we were putting in a new graphics card in the future, we'd probably also want to consider upgrading the power supply. So it's 500 watts, as we said earlier on. That's okay for the system. It topped out at 300 watts, and that's absolutely fine. If we were putting in a more advanced graphics card, then we'd maybe want to consider just changing that 500 watt out. And so maybe a 600 watt for the Corsair if we were bumping up the base spec if we were Chillblast. So overall, there was another couple of good little touches by Chillblast, having the Wi-Fi in there, so you didn't need to go out and buy an extra adapter. That's pretty good for the price, and we were really pleased with the protection that they'd used in shipping. So we would have expected normally for a system like this it would arrive in the Cooler Master box, so the case box, and maybe it would have an extra container around the outside. Some manufacturers do that. With Chillblast we got a massive great cardboard box, and inside that the PC itself was suspended in polystyrene and wrapped in plastic, but surrounding all of that was shredded cardboard. Now that offered loads of protection in shipping. I mean, it was a massive box with loads of cardboard inside it, so it arrived in perfect condition. The one downside to that was that there was quite a lot of cardboard dust from the shredding process, and so that coated the outside of the plastic bag, and because it wasn't sealed properly at the bottom, some of the cardboard dust got on the bottom of the case, and we had to just wipe that off before we started. Not a huge issue, but maybe polystyrene peanut things would have solved that and meant that the system arrived without that little bit of dust on it. The overclock that Chillblast went with was really good. A 4.4 was completely stable on this system. None of the other parts had received the kind of massive overclock or anything like that, so the memory was running at stock speed, stuff like that. All fine. That 4.4 gigahertz was quite frequently used by the system, so obviously it was going up to that when it was able to, and then dropping down at idle and all that sort of thing. So we saw that 4.4 gigahertz a lot when we were testing. It gives it that little bit of a boost that takes it above a high-end AMD chip. There are some scenarios where the AMD chip would win. Things that are very much multi-threaded, it tends to do quite well. And when we compare the overclocked 4670K in the Chillblast system to a standard i5-4770K, the performance follows kind of a similar trend to the AMD one. So if you've got a application that relies very much on speed of, say, a single core or something like that, the Chillblast system will give you a big boost in that and take you past the i7. If you've got anything that starts to use more threads or cores, then the i7 starts to really pull ahead. So for example, the CD conversion test, where we were able to convert a track per thread, you're converting 4 tracks at a time on the Chillblast system and 8 tracks at a time on the i7 system, and that allows it, even though the i7 is running slower in megahertz, the i7 still finishes faster because it can do more at a time. So stable overclock allows you to do a lot. Wi-Fi performance was really good, allows anyone who's using up to 70 meg home broadband to run without issue. That also allows you to stream high definition content without any problems. You might want to upgrade to a dual band faster Wi-Fi adapter if you have a faster home internet connection, so 100 meg, 120 meg, whatever you have at home. If you're up that level, you probably want to change the adapter to get full speed, but overall pretty good. And gaming wise, also very impressive from the Tiger Shark. So you might think a GTX 660 is a bit mid-range for a Haswell system, but actually it allows you to game at 1920 by 1080 without any problem. We had ultra detail, maximum detail, whatever you want to call it, on all of the games. Things like Grid 2, with it being a slightly older engine, we were able to turn on anti-aliasing at 8 times and it ran flawlessly. Dota 2, again, maximum anti-aliasing in game. We weren't able to use anti-aliasing in Metro, it would drop performance too much, but we were able to turn on PhysX, which gives us the enhanced smoke effects and things like that on the Nvidia card, and performance was flawless as you saw from the videos. So 1920 by 1080 gaming in the latest releases, all fine on the Tiger Shark. So overall, a pretty decent system. We feel it's probably priced about right at £750. That's including VAT. Would have been nice, as we said earlier, to see a slightly better PSU in the system, but otherwise the components all fine and overall a pretty nice build. So thanks for watching, and remember to subscribe, and if you want to check out our channel, we've got plenty of other Haswell content, including our launch review and other videos on Haswell. So yes, thanks for watching and see you soon.